Does this ever seem to happen to you? You've planned an intricate and thrilling combat for your D&D players, only to have everyone stand around and whack each other until they fall unconscious, like a bunch of flesh piñatas. Despite the painstaking hours you put in to try to make your combat feel alive and dynamic, it somehow fell flat. So you get the terrain and you get the models and you plan another grand encounter, only to have the same thing happen to you again. Don't worry, I've got a solution for you. Hello everyone, I am the Dungeon Engineer and I'm here to teach you how to utilize your terrain to create interesting and dynamic combat for your D&D campaign. For this video, I'm going to be using the terrain that we made in our previous video to explain the points that I'm making. So if you missed that video, make sure to give it a watch. The point is, you don't need anything fancy to create these great fights. Let's get into it. The key to making terrain pieces work to their full potential is to make them interactable. Interactable in a way in which your players can catch on easily to what they can or even should do with the items in the given area. You could even go as far to make these terrain pieces a separate goal of the encounter. Let me give a few examples with my lovely barricade terrain. Now, these barricades are very good for blocking line of sight, in which is a very obvious way to use these, and there's nothing wrong with using these to block line of sight. These pieces, they force players to take interesting paths to get to their goal, but you can take these barricades even further than that. In this first scenario, we're going to center the goal of the encounter around the barricades, completely surrounding a key NPC in a somewhat makeshift prison. To add to the prison effect, you can add a comically large lock holding the barricade gate shut. And here's where we spice things up to actually make your players get out of their comfort zone and move around your battlefield. The point is to release this prisoner within the fight, either by putting this NPC's life in danger or giving the party some sort of advantage for releasing it. Him, her, whoever, this person, or it could be an animal. NPC. So now this scenario is set up. The next step is, how do we free this prisoner? The obvious answer is there's a key. And we can put this key in a variety of places. We can put it on a guard, we can put it inside a bedroll, under a rock, in a tent. The point is to make the key's location fairly obvious so that the players can discover it before combat or perhaps even during combat. Perhaps they interrogated a goblin from before and learned that they keep all their keys in this one certain tent, so if they want to free their key NPC, they raid the tent before combat starts. Or if everything goes sideways and combat already starts, they have to run to the tent first and grab the key. Even if they don't learn that, perhaps when combat starts, the goblins yell at each other, guard that tent. They're even talking about it before combat starts if your players are stealthing up. Maybe one goblin is flashing the shiny key to another goblin. There are many ways to introduce this idea of the key. Despite making the key obvious, you still want to be open to unique solutions to saving the NPC regardless. Although you have planned a way for Mr. NPC to be saved, it is a lot more fun for your players to discover unique solutions. The main point of the key is to provide that clear path so that there is no frustration of clarity. To stress that this NPC must be released during the fight or as soon as possible, you can set up plot hooks beforehand. Perhaps this NPC was the captain of the guard or a sheriff or an old adventurer. And even during the fight, he can be shouting out information through the cracks of the barricade, not just how he can fight to help the party, but even information how he can be saved through the key or however other method. Or if the party knows that this NPC is being killed today, the party arrives with an enemy ready to strike him down with inside the barricade walls. and so they have to fight through the other goblins to try to get inside before the NPC can be killed. Maybe even the goblins put wolves in its cage as some sort of cruel entertainment. Even if they can't see the NPC, they hear them yelling, they could hear them fighting, the wolves growling. The point is, freeing this NPC takes precedent over the fight itself. Now, that is a neat encounter and all, but you may be wondering, I didn't really get to use the barricades as barricades. I just got to use them as a cage, and that's not why I built them. I'm not ever going to use them as cages. I mean, fair enough, but if you still want to use your barricades, here's my second solution. Let your players knock over your barricades. In something like this, you want to set up all these interactions with your terrain you want to set up so that it is apparent that your players can interact with them. And maybe they won't, and that's completely fine. If your players don't interact with them, you can't force them to interact with them. You just want to make sure that you're showing them the option is there. Perhaps whenever they come up to this encampment, they see these goblins trying to tie down this barricade with some rope. And when one goblin messes up one of the ropes, you see that the barricade collapses on him. And if the players look around, they'll notice all the barricades are held up by rope. This should start to plant the idea into the players' minds that, these barricades that these goblins have set up are not very sturdy because they're not very smart. So maybe with a couple of well-placed cuts to these ropes, you could topple the barricade, or maybe if you have a strong barbarian, he could just push one of them down. And the consequences for the barricade falling on any creature could be as bad as taking a boatload of damage, or just losing a turn trying to get unwedged from beneath the rubble. When you use terrain like this, you're essentially just keeping the terrain as normal and leaving the option open for them to interact. The combat can proceed essentially the exact same regardless of whether they interact with the terrain or not. But if they know they can, and it's obvious that they can, your players are probably going to. Especially if you create an advantage for interaction, and you should if you're going for dynamic gameplay. Okay, enough about barricades. Probably the easiest one of those terrain pieces that I built to utilize in interaction. Let's talk about rocks. Rocks. I feel like most of the time I look at rocks on my playmat and I say, yeah, there's them rocks. But the point is, even with the most bare bones, simple piece of terrain that is almost just set dressing, you can still use this in one obvious way. If you have enough space for a miniature to fit on top of a rock, you can gain some sort of advantage for standing on high ground. Although you can give advantage for high ground, I would be a little bit wary of giving something astronomical, as your players will try to climb on top of everything, or they will try to learn how to fly, and flying players, yeah, that's not fun. Either a +1 to hit or a +1 to AC, something that gives a little boost, But the big thing that I think you can do with rocks is chuck them. How you do this? You create a larger enemy, a large, strong enemy, and as a part of their moveset, you want to give them the ability to actually pick up and throw the terrain pieces. And hence, this is where our rocks come in. You have these rocks laid out the battlefield. So at this point, the players aren't just fighting this monster, they're fighting the actual battlefield as well. Let's take these rocks and the high ground a step farther. What if getting on top of these rocks prevented some sort of ultimate attack that rose up from the ground? So now not only do the players have to worry about touching the ground and getting hit by some sort of attack, but they also have to try to leap from rock to rock in order to move around. Now for this one you might need more rocks, but you can also still use your other terrain pieces. Maybe they have to be knocking over the barricades like in our last scenario to create these platforms that they have to jump to. The last set of terrain are the bedrolls and the tent. The obvious one is you can have enemies hidden inside the tent that your players can't necessarily see, act as reinforcements throughout the battle. The enemies, they can use the blankets of the bedroll as a distraction, pick them up, toss them on the players, go run, go hide, disengage. The more that your creatures and the monsters engage with the environment, the more likely that your players are going to try to, and that is what's going to create this interesting combat loop. If they see that your monsters can utilize these things that are actually laid out on the table, your players will want to too. There are several ways to actually utilize your terrain, and you don't even have to use them as they were intended to be used. You can make your barricade bridges, you can make them ladders, you can make your rocks, you can make them pedestals, you can make your rocks crystals. They don't have to be just rocks, they don't have to be just barricades. And that is the way to use your terrain to the fullest potential, coming up with all these different ways for your players to interact with them. And the more that your monsters and your creatures interact, the more that your players will, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment, and I hope to see you in the next one.